Hello and welcome to episode 149 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
And I'm James Whittingham. We have for you this week, it's time to declare Toyota totally dead. Call in the doctor. Time of death, the introduction of episode 149 of the Clean Energy Show.
That's right, James. The CEO of Toyota has stepped down. A tearful Akio Toyoda said in a statement he just couldn't bear Brian and James mocking him on the Clean Energy Show.
Coward. And I learned that lots of Chinese homes burn coal right in the house. And I felt bad for burning my toast the other day.
British Petroleum has released an outlook report that says they believe oil demand peaked in 2019. The only thing they could do at this point to increase oil output is another Gulf of Mexico disaster like the Deepwater Horizon. They're currently negotiating with Mark Wahlberg to star in the disaster movie sequel.
All that and more on this show, including our local airport is capturing carbon. I don't know why I shop for a cheap EV. That saga continues. An exclusive prediction about Robotaxi fleets from me, James Whittingham, co-host of the Clean Energy Show. All that and more this week. I've continued car buying, Brian. There's been a shocking development in my car buying. Last week on the show, if you remember, I said that I wanted that my Prius, we have a 2017 Prius, reasonable mileage, lower than average, a little bit lower than average. And it's worth a lot of money. It's selling on the dealership lot for almost what we paid for it, or it's listed on the dealership. We saw it the other day because we took the vehicle in and finally got it fixed. We had the catalytic converter unit replaced, and we had to convince them that it was under warranty for a second time because we went through this in November, but it took this long to get the part. But yeah, it happened. It was completely paid for. Nice. But now I want to get rid of the vehicle.
Yeah.
Because it's getting old. It's 6 years old now. It's almost 6 years old. In the spring, it'll be 6 years old. But it's worth as much as we paid for it almost. So I see this as my little gold mine that can help me get into an EV because I can't normally afford an EV, and EVs are more expensive. So I'm looking for what EV could I get into because the EVs that are currently available aren't great, such as the Chevrolet Bolt, because I know that it's going to go down in price, and I know that the charging speed is ridiculously slow. It's 50 kilowatts. It's really hard to take a highway trip without ruining your day, like an hour each stop at least.
You wouldn't want to,
worse in the wintertime. So it makes it very challenging to do a highway trip. It's great for in town, but once you get on the highway, it becomes, you really have to have some time to do that. I came to the conclusion that I'll just buy another Prius. They're coming up with this exciting new Prius that's getting all these great reviews, the 2023 Prius. I'm not crazy about the size of it because it's like an inch or two lower, and my head gets stuck trying to get in and out of my wife's car as it is. It's really hard. I'm 6 feet, but I got 2 inches on my ass at least. There, I did it again. I said bad things. I'm sorry, kids. Sorry. So anyway, I thought, well, maybe we can get a Prius. Not a Prius Prime, because those won't come here where we are. They'll go to ZEV states first and provinces, and that'll probably take at least a couple of years. So, yeah. But guess what? The Prius went up in price a huge amount. It's already gone up in price.
What?
They just put up the 2022 by about $3,000. And the new one is $36,500 in Canada and $28,000 in the U.S., which is $2,400 more in the U.S. than it is right now. So, yeah, it's so that makes that car. I'm getting angry again. Fire up the defibrillator. That feels better. I'm getting angry because the Prius is as much as an EV. Because if you look at the base EVs, you can get a couple of them for around $41,000, $42,000. You take off in Canada a $5,000 grant, and it's EV. Why? Why would I buy a Prius instead of an EV? The Prius is a compelling car now. They've given it some oomph in the department, in the horsepower department.
Yeah,
it looks a lot better. But it
looks great.
It's not big. I mean, you could practically get an ID4 for that much, a base one, if you could get one, but you can't here. In the States, you can. People in the States, I envy you. You can just walk around and buy an EV at will. In fact, in California and other places, the 2022 Bolt EVs are like $5,000, $5,800 off the already low price. You're getting this right now. You're getting the $7,500 off the federal grant for a while. They've lowered the price by $6,000, raised it by $900, and now they're taking off for the 2022 models if you can find one. That's basically free, Brian. It's basically free. I don't know why you're not buying one and selling it. Like it's just ridiculous how cheap they are. That puts them down to like $15,000 for an EV that I have to pay $45,000 for. And that's no fun.
That's crazy.
And well, and also the BS that we're going to talk about later, Toyota and their low EV ambitions. This is crap. And I've declared Toyota dead. They weren't selling many Prii before this. You know that? Because a lot of the people who bought Priuses were early adopters. They moved on to Teslas or other EVs. A lot of them moved to Teslas. That was the number one car that people came from when the Model 3 was released for the first few years. So no one's buying the Prius anymore. They're a fraction of what their sales were. And now they're raising the price by $8,000, $7,000 into the price range of... It's just infuriating. This is why you said in the intro that the Toyota CEO is going to step down. But everything's expensive in Canada, Brian. The Ioniq 5 is up $4,000. They're just trying to make it hard for me.
Yeah, well, we talked last week. So the Tesla announced price cuts recently. So the Teslas are getting more affordable, maybe not quite into your price range. And the Mustang Mach-E, they've now dropped the price of that, which is good news.
It's an expensive car, though.
It's still an expensive car,
it's more
unfortunately.
expensive than the Teslas.
But meanwhile, Volkswagen and Hyundai, I believe, have both said, no, we're not lowering prices. We're not playing that game of chasing low prices. And I assume they're already kind of maybe losing money on every one or just barely making profits. So,
well, if I'm in America, what am I going to buy? Am I going to buy the one that reduced by several $1,000s, the one that didn't? And things are going to change in the middle of March when they supposedly figure out what's going to qualify. Is it made, enough of it made in America? Is enough of the batteries made in America to qualify? And a lot of them won't.
Yeah, for the Inflation Reduction Act, the exact details have not been announced, but there'll be some great discounts on some EVs if they're American made in America.
And maybe when that day comes, there'll be better supply in Canada. So I don't know what to do. I tried to contact the Volkswagen dealer in our town here. They didn't get back to me. I asked them, can you order a VW ID4? I looked on Auto Trader to see what the national used inventory was and new. And there's quite a few of them around. They're selling for more than MSRP, so screw that. I could see a day when the Tesla has too many vehicles, when they get production going, and they're down to compete with the ID4 and the Ioniq 5 and EV6 and all those cars in that price range.
Yeah,
and those are a bit bigger.
I should maybe talk to you about that. So, we're hoping to buy a new EV in the next few months that will be longer range. So, in my retirement, I hope to do a lot of road trips. So I don't know. I should maybe make you an offer on my Tesla.
Here's the problem with that, Brian, and I thank you for the offer. But here's the problem. Once I commit to a car like that, we're kind of like living paycheck to paycheck. And if something goes wrong, like if the window cracks, God help me, like it's going to be $1 million to fix that puppy. And if the heater goes on that's not under warranty or the struts or anything like that, part of the deal with the devil we make when we do buy a new car is that we won't have to pay any money, aside from the oil changes, which you won't have to do with an EV, which is nice.
Yeah. No, getting something under warranty might be the way to go for you.
Yeah. But like I said, though, the used prices were briefly trickling down to $45,000 for a while nationally, plus $2,000 delivery. But that's Yeah, who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? It's going to be interesting to see what the market will be 2 years from now once they finally start making EVs and Tesla's all their factories are running at full steam. It's going to be a different market than we have today. But having said that, I don't want to wait that long. I've got this gold mine in the Prius. The good news is that the Prius will be worth a lot, right? Because the new car is going up in money, which will make it even, that'll help. That'll help my cause.
Yeah.
My prediction is that when Robotaxi fleets become a thing, they're going to say, okay, we need 100 cars for our fleet for this size of city, okay? Say a small city, small town even, 100 cars. I think they're going to buy 200. And the reason is because they only last so many miles. They might last 1 million miles each, but they're always driving. So if you buy twice as many, you extend that fleet twice as long, but you can have them charging. Sure. And feeding the grid. So you're making money that way. The economic sense is going to be to buy 2, maybe even 3 times as many cars. So factor that into your stock buying when you think about how many cars are going to go into any particular Robotaxi fleet.
Well, I'm going to skip ahead then to a story about New York City, which has now introduced new rules that Uber and Lyft must be zero-emission fleets by 2030. In New York City. This story is from The Guardian. This is a big deal, but it makes sense for exactly the reason that you're talking about. These are cars that are driving all the time. So if we're going to force vehicles to be 100% electric, those are the ones that we should go after first.
Yeah. I can't hear you.
Check. Can you hear me now? My recording audio stopped, but my other one is still going, so we should be good.
Go ahead.
I'll just do that whole bit again. So Uber and Lyft must be zero emission in New York City by 2030. This is a new rule that has just been announced. I read about it in The Guardian. And I think if you're going to force certain vehicles to go electric, it makes sense to have fleets like that be the first to do it. If you're going to force somebody to be electric, because those are, like you say, cars that are on the road, 24/7. And, imagine all the exhaust emissions you could save if all of the Ubers, Lyfts, and then perhaps taxis as well, especially in a crowded place like New York City. Obviously, it's a no-brainer. Those should be the first ones to go all electric.
And as younger people replace older people in society, more and more people are going to, have less cars, which you don't really have in New York anyway, in Manhattan. But also you're going to be more apt to use an app and use a ride-sharing service. So I think the percentage by 2030 is even going to be higher than it is today. So there's going to be even bigger advantage in 2030 than there is today.
Absolutely.
Brian, I listened to a pro-nuclear podcast the other day. It's a podcast I listen to called The Energy Gang. Sometimes I listen to it. It's got mostly insiders and policy people on it. It's a bit dry for your average audience, but their audience has been egging them on to talk about nuclear. And you know how there's a lot of people out there. I don't know if anyone still listens to our show because I've been saying bad things for a long time. A lot of pro-nuclear people. My son, I've got a nephew that's pro-nuclear. Nuclear. And a lot of people argue about it on Twitter too. So the idea, like I said last week, and as I mocked my son, was that you have this problem where you have to decarbonize. Well, we have this technology that can put out vast amounts of electricity without carbon.
Yeah.
But it's not that simple. You see, there hasn't been much nuclear done since the early 80s, right? Worldwide. I mean, we've seen the Vogtle 2 reactors being added in Georgia, and it's been, I don't know, what is it, a decade overdue, and billions, like twice as much as it was supposed to be, because they haven't done it in so long. And because of, the accident in Japan and other accidents ever since Chernobyl, actually, that the money, it's all safety. Like all the money, the expense of this is safety. So if you
Yeah.
make them cheap, you are compromising safety. A lot of people are worried about that. But here's the base of it. We have to decarbonize the world's electrical grid, make it net zero by 2035. That's a little over 10 years from now. It's 12 years less a month, okay? That is no time at all. You can't even, unless you have a worldwide consensus to go nuclear to solve that problem yesterday, and you are ready to go with it tonight, you still probably won't meet it because a lot of those projects aren't going to be done in 12 years. Maybe none of them, because we're still getting up to speed on it. So when we hear the pro-nuclear people, the people who work in nuclear, talk about how we have to do this, it has to be part of the mix. There's no other option. We can't rely on storage. They called it dreams in this podcast. I'm going to play a bunch of clips from it if you don't mind, because I want people to hear what that side of the story is, but how hearing their side of the story made me have more doubts about nuclear. So they basically admit, they admit in the podcast that the nuclear can't help us reach net zero by 2035. 2050, yes. That's when everything has to be decarbonized. And you can use nuclear for heat. You can, heat a city if you build a city with pipes under it and it comes from a nuclear reactor heating molten salt water or something. There's different things that they can do, and maybe even industrial applications. But nuclear is not going to solve our problem. So if you're pro-nuclear, you're like throwing in the towel on solving climate change because it's not realistic. Even the people who are there working on it and are all for it say the same thing, that you can't do it. They don't like to talk about it. It's mumbled under their breath, but they've said those words, and I'll have those words for you. Yeah, okay, so they've claimed that they've learned from the mistakes of the Vogtle 2 reactor in Georgia, I don't think it's not even running yet. There's still delays, cost overruns, time overruns. We've discussed it numerous times on the show. This is Katie Huff, head of the Office of Nuclear Energy at the Department of Energy in the United States.
But we've learned so much in building those plants, learned about making sure that the design is fully complete before it's starting work, making sure that you have enough craftspeople in your region, skilled trade workers and craftspeople, union workers, to do the work of electricians and boilermakers and welders and everything that's required, construction union labor, to actually build a plant. Taking a design to an on-the-grid power plant is an incredible endeavor that we haven't done at scale since the sort of decades between the 70s and 90s.
And that's kind of the problem. We don't have trained workers. There's no workforce. They have to learn. They have to build and then learn. So one generation of nuclear before you can learn anything and train a workforce, well, that's a decade and a half at least. And then by then, game over. So you can't throw in the towel. We don't need to throw in the towel. That's my problem with it. Renewables will solve the problem. And no one wants to admit that because nuclear seems like it's also more expensive, but who cares, right? It's already significantly more expensive. Okay. So here she is admitting that they can't, in fact, get nuclear to decarbonize electricity by 2035 for a 1.5 degree world. And getting there even in 2050 would take an effort like the nuclear boom in the 70s. It's been done before, but it would take a Herculean effort just to get there by 2050.
50% reduction in our carbon emissions by 2030, 100% clean electric grid by 2035, and net zero economy, including all of our other carbon emissions by 2050.
That's kind of mind-blowing, actually. Leave aside, as you say, everything else is going on with renewables and storage and the progress that has to happen there. Just think about the nuclear piece of that then. So to double the nuclear capacity on the US grid over that time period, so that's what, basically by 2035 you're saying, so 12 years or so now. Is that really achievable? And if so, how?
I think we probably can get there by 2050, and the doubling, would be by 2050 to get to that net zero. But it is certainly the case that we would have to work as fast as we have ever worked. So between 1970 and 1990, the United States built 95 gigawatts electric of nuclear capacity. And that is precisely the amount that we're going to have to add in order to double Plus, we have to either extend the licenses of our existing fleet in such a way that they will make it to 2050, and not all reactors will pass the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's, high standards for those license extensions all the way to 100 years, right? We do expect some reactors will shut down. And so we will need to build even more than that 95 gigawatts in the next 25 years. So we have to build them as quickly as we did in the highest rate that we ever have in the United States, but about the same. It's not so far out of the realm of possibility because we have done it before.
But keep in mind, that's for 2050. And if they did that, you'd think the whole world would be saying, okay, we're going nuclear, get people trained, start schools. There's nuclear plumbers. There's all kinds of different technicians. This is part of the problem why France has half of the nuclear capacity, because there's nobody trained to fix the things. They're finding it a hard time that, the maintenance can't go on because nuclear is not a thing anymore. I'm sorry. It hasn't been in a long time. There was a sort of a renaissance in the early 2000s, and then, the Japan accident happened. And the reason why there was a renaissance was for the same reasons. Well, I think if they might have had a shot at having a lot more nuclear then. I don't know. But anyway.
And keeping some of them online, the existing ones, makes sense. And we've talked about that before. But as mentioned in that clip, they're not all going to be up to safety specs. So we don't necessarily want to do that.
And Katie really pointed at one thing in particular, and it's the reason why in France you have the troubles we have, is we've sent 20 to 30 years of signals to the youth that we're getting out of nuclear. So you cannot be surprised when we no longer have nuclear welders or draftsmen, and that's what's happening in France. They're not saying, oh, the reactors are not operational, so let's put in question the technology. What they're saying is two things. First, we cannot keep saying to students that we're not going to be. And that's why, really, Katie was at the forefront as a university professor helping build that workforce, which is single-handedly the most important thing.
Yeah, that's Carl Perez. And here's Katie Huff again talking about the current state of nuclear projects that are hoping, if successful, to be commercially available in the early 2030s. And that's near D-Day. So it's kind of scary to think of that.
If you're dependent on Russia for those supplies, that seems to me to be a huge...
So that's the wrong clip.
So if successful, we have 3 DOE cost-shared projects that will build commercial nuclear plants in the United States. One is a 6-pack of NuScale reactors that's targeting the end of the decade. Another is the TerraPower Natrium reactor, again, targeting around 2030, possibly a little bit later, depending on risks around fuel. And a third is the X-Energy Xe-100 high-temperature gas reactor, again, targeting, around the end of this decade. And those 3 cost-shared projects are going to be commercial on the grid when they reach their deadlines, all around that 2030 timeframe. And so we're really looking at all those types of reactors being, in the commercial sector by then. The real challenge is, the ones that will move fast enough in the scaling sense are the ones that are going to be building up their order books today.
All right. And we talked about energy insecurity and how nuclear can solve that. That's why there's more interest in nuclear, and that's why these people are optimistic about it. But when you hear them talk, you almost sound like when they hear themselves speak that they realize that, this is BS, that it's really not going to work. But we're a lot of stuff is dependent on Russia. So, I mean, you can stockpile, as they say in this clip, but you still need materials from other countries.
If you're dependent on Russia for those supplies, that seems to me to be a huge problem. Am I right to think that? I mean, is it as big of a problem as it sounds? And if it is a problem, how do you get around it?
Yeah, it's a huge problem. About 20% of the enriched uranium that we use to feed our existing fleet in the United States is Russian enriched, right? And we would really like to get back to a place where the United States can at least fill its own needs from trusted suppliers. In order to do that, it'll take an investment in our fuel cycle and potentially import restrictions. But we're in a place ultimately where the most important thing will be investments in that fuel cycle that expand the existing capacity for enrichment here in the United States and among our allies. That thankfully is a sort of slow moving process because of those slow fuel cycles and because of the very small amounts, you can store large amounts of inventory of nuclear fuel in a way that is less just in time as like the natural gas or other petroleum markets, for example. Nuclear reactors can store, many years of fuel on site, which makes them very energy secure.
Yeah, and that's true if you do store them, but you have, are the private companies going to do that? Basically, they're talking about investment. That's not happening either. They need investment for these things as well. This is Carl Perez talking about how the programs are 20 years. Everything is a 20-year thing.
Just keep on investing in this technology, and it's going to be a long-term investment. Many of the countries that are benefiting from nuclear, we're looking at 20-year programs. So we cannot look for immediate gratification when it comes to these type of decisions.
Fail. That's it's horrifying to think that so many people think nuclear is the solution. But they don't understand the Paris Agreement. They don't understand what we need and what we need to do and what it means if we don't do it, if we go beyond a 1.5 degree world. I mean, the world is already ugly weather-wise, climate-wise. It's already, it's crazy. We don't need to go any further than that.
Well, we haven't so far been able to convince people of the urgency of it with 3 years of podcasts. But it's super urgent and we have to move fast. And that's not something that people are really used to in this world.
And don't think it's about going out and buying an EV and recycling your trash. It's about government policy. It's about the world. We have no time for individual efforts for changing behavior. It has to be done on a grand scale. There is no time for nuclear at all. There's not. It's not even. We're not even talking about price today. We talked about price most of the time. There's no time for it. We have 12 years less a month. Extending the life of current plants, good idea. Do it. Should you build more reactors next to existing? Maybe that's an idea. I don't know if there's cost savings on that, but you have to, you have to pay the price. People in this podcast said that nuclear would make things cheaper, and they said that they don't care about the price of things. What they care about is your power bill. But what that means is the government's paying for the electricity that brings down your power bill. If they're paying for the nuclear plant, of course your power bill is going to go down because it's not your power bill that's paying for it. It's not your utility, but you are paying for it.
Yeah, your taxes.
Everyone's paying taxes, so nothing's free. There's no free lunch there, people. SMR, they said in this podcast, has to be large scale, which we all know, in order to have cost savings, because it's not. So you have to have the first ones come online in the 30s. Then you have to learn from those mistakes and train people. And by then, boom, too late. But then at that point, you build a factory, one factory, not competing factories. You have efficiencies of scale, and that might be useful. It may still be part of the mix at one day for the North, for mines and things like that. And cheaper is not safer. The high cost of nuclear power is almost entirely due to safety. And there's a lot of carbon emissions from it too. It's just, there's no time. Just familiarize yourself with what needs to be done and when with climate next time you go on about nuclear.
Okay, so we got another obsolete energy technology to talk about. A couple of stories about coal, which is remarkable it still even exists at all, that we make electricity by burning coal. A story from Bloomberg here. Replacing U.S. coal plants with solar and wind is cheaper than running them. So this is something we've talked about before. From the article here, nearly all existing U.S. coal plants require more cash to operate than the cost of replacing them with new wind or solar projects, according to a report from the San Francisco-based climate think tank.
This is like 99%, Brian, in the United States. It's almost all of them.
It's almost all of them, and the findings are backed up by Bloomberg NEF, New Energy Finance. They did a similar study and found the exact same thing. So where we live, there is still coal burning for electricity generation. And no, it doesn't even make sense to even keep it running, even the stuff that already exists. This is a point we've been expecting to get to, and apparently that point is here now.
Yeah, and just to be fair, though, in Canada, it's probably different because we need more solar. The cost of solar is higher because we need more of it to generate the same amount because of shorter winter days and things like that.
And the other issue here is the Inflation Reduction Act in the U.S. This is the thing that's sort of spiking it and putting it over the top. It would have maybe taken a little bit longer if it wasn't for that massive influx in cash. But the bill is doing what it's supposed to do. It's encouraging clean technology, which ends up discouraging dirty technology. So your government at work.
Yeah. Let's get to the tweet of the week. This is from Assad Razouk. Cost overruns of mega projects and another reason why solar and wind are winning. This is all the different power generation and the average cost overruns of mega projects. Nuclear storage is at 238%. That is the cost to store, or you have to store nuclear after it's spent. There are interesting options for spent rods now for recycling them, but still, eventually you have to store them, and it's usually 230% more than anticipated. Nuclear power is 120% more. So if something is $10 billion, it ends up being $22 billion, if my math is correct, Brian.
Yeah.
Hydro is 75% more. Fossil power, 16%. Wind power is 13% more. Energy transmission lines, 8% more. And solar is only 1% more. So that's interesting.
Yeah, solar is, I guess, the most predictable of all these energy technologies to deploy, which is good news.
Yeah, when more about when the sun is going to shine than how much the wind is going to pull. They actually have more data on that. That's just one little part of that. Tweet number 2, I'm going to throw this in. This is from Jigar Shah, the U.S. Department of Energy. Once a FOAK project is executed successfully at $6,200 per kilowatt, subsequent SMRs would be expected to come down the cost curve to $3,600 per kilowatt hour after 15 to 20 deployments. So that's how long it would take, 15 to 20. That's going to take a long time, Brian. The first one's not there. It's years away from being there. So it's just not going to work.
Yeah, because we're kind of starting again with nuclear, we've got to build a whole one first and then learn from it. And just building the first one is 10 or 15 years.
Yeah, and they think that if you did a whole bunch, you might be able to get down to be on budget. And by the way, they also said on the podcast that most of the people interested in nuclear want big projects. They want full nuclear reactors. They don't want the little ones. So that's an issue too. The U.S. would need 300 additional trained workers with technical and non-technical skill sets to construct and operate 200 gigawatts of advanced nuclear. I'm going to skip through that quickly, but I just wanted to mention that. And also I learned this week that Chinese homes are burning coal in their homes. I didn't know that. There's a lot I don't know about China. You've been to China. I blame you for not telling me.
But I was in Beijing, which was a very modern city. I wouldn't have expected anything like that from what I experienced of it. But, it's a vast country with lots of different smaller cities, which is probably your country.
Yeah, the coal cities are primarily the ones that are near coal mines. So a slew of northern Chinese cities covered under China's Hawaii River policy, which since the 1950s have provided subsidized coal for indoor heating. Not only have they used coal, they've subsidized it to heat indoor homes north of the Hawaii River, where temperatures fall far below freezing. Probably nothing like they are here, but cold. The country burns around 300 million metric tons of coal just for heating houses every year, and that's 7% of annual coal production in China goes into individual homes. Now, they have a program right now where they're, switching over to natural gas. I say switch over to electricity, get it done. Why do the thing that's going to go away anyway?
Why do the interim step? Yeah. But you and I are probably old enough that there were probably people burning coal in their homes here when we were kids, I would guess.
Brian, I'm officially ex-naying the lightning round this week. I apologize. It'll be back next week. It was a short one anyway. We'll hold some of that over to next week. I want to dip into the mailbag here. We have feedback from Galax, Virginia again. This is Ryan, who is talking to us for a second time.
Aloha, James and Brian. This is Ryan from Galax, Virginia. Just calling to return and report regarding the solar farm that is going up in our area. We had gone to the community meeting last month. The name of the company that is doing this project in our area is called River Trail Solar LLC. They are part of a larger company, Energix Renewables, that is doing a lot of solar and clean energy projects. So they appear to be moving forward with this project. They're going through some final stages of permitting, and hopefully they'll be breaking ground and starting to build later this year. We just wanted to also say thank you again for all the information that you provide each week and the work that goes into that. Our family listens diligently. I had mentioned briefly at my last message that we had an Ioniq 5. It turns out for my work in home health, it wasn't quite enough range, so I got a Tesla Model 3. I went with the Tesla. We are loving it and enjoying supporting clean energy. Mahalo.
Thank you, Ryan. And if you want to leave us a message like he did, speakpipe.com/clean energy show. We love getting messages. Thank you, Ryan, for taking the time to do that.
Yeah, thanks.
Last time you talked about this project, I couldn't find any mention of it online. Nothing. And now I've got a few hits. Not a lot, but I'm actually raised some eyebrows to me. And hello to your family, by the way, for listening. Thank you. I apologize if I got a little angry earlier, but it's a heated, problematic topic we talk about sometimes. 339 acres for a small community solar farm right in Galax by their, the parent company is Israeli, and they've come on under some suspicions and problems. And the Virginia Human Rights Council is issued a press release against them saying deceptive practices of Energex renewable energy. Multiple Virginia companies have petitioned the state and multiple authorities to withhold permits from them. This is from Yahoo Finance, which picked up on the press release. $1.8 billion in 35-year Energex revenue has been stalled or canceled. So it sounds like these guys could be not legit or
Interesting.
Not together. So I would be worried if, they hired them. It's kind of on like a monorail. They're going around to smaller, centers and selling them things that maybe they shouldn't be sold. I don't know. I'm a little bit worried about that, but there's not very much information on it. They might be trying to avoid investor and community backlash. It says Energex is misleading communities about its track record by filing materially misleading notices of intent or filing them late in the state permitting process. Yeah. So there you have it.
Well, I hope it works out.
Eric Wolski in California writes, "Hi, Brian and James. I was surprised to see this fully electric Ford Transit van at my Walmart grocery store. I don't remember seeing any kind of announcement by Walmart. I think we covered it. I think we did.
I don't recall.
Okay. Well, it sounds familiar to me. I can't look through the files and find it, but Anyway, good news, says Eric. Thank you, Eric, for writing to us. And he sent us a couple of pictures of, it's really nice to see. They're parked in the Walmart parking lot. They're Ford Transit vans, but they're, say, 100% electric on the sides, which is obviously what we want. Brian, we love to hear from our listeners. The best way to contact us, if you're not brave enough to leave us a SpeakPipe message, is cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. And we've got a YouTube channel, and we've got all kinds of presence on social media, especially TikTok, where our handles are @CleanEnergyPod. And if you're new to the show, remember to subscribe on your favorite podcast app to get new episodes delivered every week. And thanks again to our listeners who have donated to us by pressing on the donate button in the show notes. We'll see you again next week, everyone.
See you next week.